Okay, I'm going to try. I'm not very good at speaking into a mic. So, what we wanted to do today, is it better if I actually speak in the mic? But it's a hole in my mitten and it's cold. Oh, look, and it's snowing, yes. Great. Okay. We should do. Okay, let's get going. So what we wanted to do was actually give a slightly different perspective of Gregg Lake. As in, I normally see my eyes are just at water level, swimming along, enjoying things. But there's a whole lot of different sides of Gregg Lake that are really pretty interesting if you're interested in it. So what I'd like to do is start with sort of the bigger picture here, which is this is Gregg Lake, in case anybody didn't know that. This is Gregg Lake out here, and it's sitting here just sort of nestled in. As I said, it's got curves. It curves around various rocky outcrops and things. But what it's doing here is basically sitting in a little valley, which is an upland valley. So it's suspended up. So we've got the ridge of mountains, which you can see back there with the wind towers on them. And it goes all the way around. You're not going to be able to see everything, which is why I have these things. But we have this ridge that goes along here where the wind towers are, and it continues on. So this is Tuttle Hill, Willard Mountain Ridge, going over to Bald Mountain here. Gregg Lake is nestled down below in right here. And if you can see, there's also is curving around. What we have here are Holt Hill, which, you can't see too well, Patton Hill, and we have right over here, which is also hard to see from right here, so people don't often see it, is what at least we locals call Cudahy Hill. So if you go up there, if you've ever gone up Brimstone Corner Road, like on a nice walk when you think, oh, it's going to continue on nice and flat like Gregg Lake Road does, you go uphill and uphill and uphill and uphill. So we have Cudahy Hill that we wrap around this way. And we have another sort of interesting feature, which is that we have an old ridge that runs along like this. And I'll show you in the next map, I'll show it a little bit clearer. But there's this old ridge which goes all the way from Route 9 across near where Reed Car Road comes out, across Old Pound Road, continues on down, goes over actually mostly just on the right side, east side of Holt Hill, and it continues on down Patton Hill and all the way down into to the Hancock line, way into Hancock, before it kind of peters out. This is the wetland by where Birch Road and High Street come out in there. It's cold out here. So what we have is a lake kind of nestled in. It's upland, as most of us are aware, maybe many of us are aware. Great Brook falls from over there, and we'll look at that in a little bit. Great Brook falls down almost 450 feet to the river. So if you've ever tried riding a bike up, which I know a few of you guys have, you know that it's up, 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 up. And then if you keep on going up, 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 another 200 feet. But we have this lake nestled in this sort of upland valley. And I'll say more later, but this is Willard Pond over here. For us who live here, where do we live? Somewhere in here. It's like 13 or 14 miles around by, winter drivable roads to Willard Pond, but it's only like 3/4 of a mile hiking through to Willard Pond. So what I'd like to show is this is all upland. Willard Pond is actually about 100 feet higher up than Gregg Lake is. So this is going to be hard because I need my mittens on.
flight or whatever.
I don't know. You didn't wear your Speedo.
Yeah, I ain't that crazy.
I mean, if anybody, you can sit at the table if you want, and we'll sort of put stuff down over there. Sorry. So this is a LiDAR view of the area. So if we focus in, and look at the greater detail of the texture of the land, what you can see, here's Gregg Lake again, in here, and you can see, I hope, that the ice sheets, stand here, look up. The ice sheets were 2 miles thick around here, and we're sliding over the terrain. So just think about, we're kind of crushed here, but they slid over, and you can see the angle they came from because they're scraping the surface here. So what we have here is you can see that they slid over the ridge. They rounded, this is Goodhue Hill. So a lot of our hills are rounded from the northwest because that's the direction the glaciers moved in with ice sheets. They rounded Cudahy Hill. They rounded Holt Hill and Patton Hill. Another thing they did was drop stuff off. So after they got to the top of a hill, it's especially obvious right here on Patton Hill. If you go down the lake and look at the far side of Patton Hill before you get into this really, really nice cove here. Does anybody here know that's where my cabin is? You can see big boulders that tumbled off the top of the hill in there, and I'll tell you some more later, but you can see that they were dropped off and they tumbled down over the hill. So a lot of the features here are, if you come off from the northwest to the southeast, you see lots of rougher rocks. Goodhue Hill has this great ledge here with a beautiful view off the top there because it just drops off. So what I wanted to sort of point out from this is you can see some really interesting details about the topography, topology. Is it what's the right word there? We just put sent the limerick to the printer, so my mind is done. So up here, but what I want to say about Gregg Lake is that this area up here is actually quite a bit uphill. So that Willard Pond is maybe 100 feet higher in elevation than Gregg Lake, but there are 2 large beaver swamps in here that are also even higher elevation. So this beaver swamp, you can see in the LiDAR, this beaver swamp once drained into Willard Pond. Nowadays it drains north and comes into Gregg Lake. Willard Pond now drains south, so it's not draining into Gregg Lake. But you can see there was water contact between the two. The other really interesting thing, or one other interesting thing, is this next beaver pond, which we call the McCready George Pond, or it's the George Farm one is, actually, this is the McCready George. This one is accessed, if you have ever gone to Balancing Rock, back in there, you can see the beaver dam at the bottom of this. But if you look at the LiDAR, what you can see is at some point there was a big washout from this beaver pond, which would be up there, into Gregg Lake. So there's a big washout. I thought I saw David. Is David here? Oh, there he is. So this is where the David Ward's, actually his mother, I believe, owns a house, but they have the old Dick Withington place, which belonged to the Prices before that, which is built on the delta. you can see it's a delta that was washed out. It's all glacial till at the where this washout came through into Gregg Lake. If you drive up Brimstone Corner Road, right in here, you can see, if you go by the Price Farm, where Jane Miller's barn is, there's a big gully off the back of the barn. So that's this gully that washed out when this water ran through and partially filled in the end of Gregg Lake. So it's very rocky, coarse, rocky glacial till there, as opposed to a lot of the more rocky in general parts on the east side. So that's up here. You can maybe see we have extensive beaver wetlands. They're beaver wetlands now, and all of this area cutting. There's a continental divide of sorts right between Willard Pond and this beaver pond. So all of this area in here, way out to where there's a sharp turn in Craig Road, drains into the northwest part of Gregg Lake, and all comes in right there at the Gregg Lake Road Bridge. Slowed now just slightly by a beaver dam under it, but so all of this drains and all of this has been sort of releasing sediment in to fill the lake up for many, many years. And as hopefully I'll show you later, it's probably 11,400 years. Okay. So, and I didn't mention it. Wait. Vanna, can you hold that up, please? So the other thing I wanted to mention, which is neat, is that at some point Gregg Lake was much higher, and Gregg Lake washed through. You can see the gullies down here. So Gregg Lake washed through and ended up down. This would be down in the Beaver Ponds. This is the Hancock line, so the Beaver Ponds right where Old Hancock Road and Pleasant Street come out. So at one point it washed out there. You can also see there's a gully that comes through here that ends up in Eva's Marsh. So Gregg Lake could easily flow, given a few more feet, could easily flow south. And Peter Boblowski, who's not here, and I have argued endlessly. He thinks it just flowed north, but you can see that it could easily, given a few more feet, could easily flow north also, which would put it up just up there, flowing into the drainage that goes into Steele's Pond. So is that Twist Brook over there? Yeah. Yeah, past Ken's and Bell Brykes and yeah. But eventually, at some point, Great Brook broke through and won the battle for wearing out a channel. So we've got Great Brook.
You got
What?
the question?
Okay.
From our viewing, would you just turn it 90 degrees to the left and you'd be right no the other way? And we have our
That's it the way it is. So there's a teeny little square part there.
Yep,
That's where you're standing.
That's where we are. Yeah.
So that helps to know where we
Yeah.
are.
Yeah. No, thank you. Yeah, because it's not necessarily obvious, and if you've only seen this part, you don't know what's down there. We have Great Brook draining Gregg Lake down like 450 feet or something to the river. The earliest maps I've found that show Gregg Lake on it show Great Brook, which comes out right over there. If anybody wants to see it, the dam may be down far enough. They've drained enough. You can start to see the rocks of the old dam coming out. We were hoping the lake would be down farther at this point, but you can actually. So I set up a spotting scope. It's on the lake, so the lake drains. The original dam was out there right between the White Birch Point Beach and Ken Aikens Beach, if you can see over there. The original dam went right across there.
But it's a natural lake.
It's a natural lake. Yes, you're right. It is a natural lake. The earliest maps I found that show were drawn before the first dam was built show Gregg Lake Great Brook just draining out of the northeastern end of the lake. I'm not sure how. There are a lot of other lakes. So that's a lake, a map they drew of the society lands, and I'm not sure. One second. I'm not sure how accurate the shape of that lake was, because a lot of the other lakes don't look too close to true either. Yeah.
So this is actually a lake, because some people have said it's a fake lake, just like Lake Pierce Lake.
No, as far as I,
Okay.
I know that I'm famous for
thought it was
denigrating
right.
Pierce Lake, but
I gave
but
you a hard time.
but
I thought it was from Samuel Gregg having
No.
a farm and wanting to.
no. So Gregg Lake is a real lake, and there's the early maps before Samuel Gregg came up here and built his dams. There are maps that show a lake here,
Okay.
not quite the same shape, but it wasn't just that he dammed up. So I better move on, or we're all going to freeze. So after in like 1793, if I can remember all this, Samuel Gregg came up to the lake and built the dam. He had actually moved to Antrim in 1777. He owned quite a bit of property in the center. And did he own the Bass Farm? I'm not sure if he actually was.
He owned that land in the region originally.
Oh, okay. So, but he owned quite a bit of land. He apparently was quite well to do, but something happened, and I don't know, maybe Stephen or somebody else would explain. He had a lot of money when he came here, but after the Revolutionary War, he had lost a whole lot. So I think, and there was something about him burying his money and nobody ever finding it or something. So it may be that the currency that he had wasn't actually good money after the Revolution, or it was okay. Yeah, that's it. So at some point, what he did was to sell all his holdings in the center, move up to the pond, what was just known as the pond at that time, and build a house and a mill. And he recognized that he didn't have to raise the lake too far to have a pretty good water supply. So there were, around that time, so late 1700s and into sort of just beyond the mid 1800s, there was actually quite a settlement of people out here, what maybe we should call now Pond West or something like that. But there were sort of at different times 6 to 8 large families who had cleared land and settled back down Brimstone Corner Road and in this area. So they're all here. So there were names you might recognize: Ney, Mills, Robinsons, Worthleys. But there were actually quite a few houses back in there. They had a little schoolhouse. It was right at the intersection where the road goes off into the George Farm.
Cellar holes.
Yeah, there are a lot of cellar holes. There was a schoolhouse. The schoolhouse was closed in 1881, I think, due to lack of pupils, and things kind of closed down. So, and eventually, George Price owned a bunch of the land, but that's sort of the story of the settlement back there. So when Samuel Gregg built his dam, the people who lived back here were very happy. So he had his saw and grist mills. They were very happy to be able to just come here. He had quite a bustling business apparently for many years, and the dam was built and rebuilt. It's hard to tell how many times, but it was redone many times. And it's I don't actually know exactly how far up he built the lake. It was probably only on the order of a few feet, maybe up to 5 feet. It's a little hard to tell. And And I was talking to someone, actually the guy who was doing the fire out on Pitcher Mountain a month or two ago, said that he had taken out an old stone dam on the Ashuelot River with a friend, and they had found that it had a wooden core. They found the beginnings of a rotting wooden core. So I'm wondering if we actually would have that on our rocky, rebuilt many times rocky old dam. So for anyone who doesn't know, it was built right across there, and it served quite a few people. And I believe they took the mills down, I forgot, 1870 or something. But by that time they had recognized the power of the water supply there. So I'm not paying any attention to my notes so randomly. I should read this quote from Cochrane. The Antrim Water Power Company that by 1847 owned the rights, what they called the privilege of the water power. So here's what Cochrane says. Thus it will be noticed that altogether there have been 22 different mills within 2 miles on this busy, mighty little stream, not counting mills rebuilt. From the pond to the river, water is now used 14 times and might be used much more. This stream has a great fall, so that less water is needed. It is fed by springs, does not dry up like other streams. I have known the mills to run here when factories on the Merrimack River and many larger streams had shut down for lack of water. This useful laughing brook thus supplies most excellent privileges. It is the life of the town. So that was the original dam, and it was important. So at some point, and it's really hard to figure out whether it actually was in the late 1880s or in the early 1900s, they decided to move the dam from that opening there back to sort of the current site now. So there's an article in the Reporter, Antrim Reporter, which, as you may know, predated the Limerick. Some of us are aging fast as we do the Limerick. So it's probable that soon there will be erected at the outlet of Gregg Pond, near the ice house, a new and substantial dam to supplement the one which has been there for about 35 years. The first intimation of such need was last week, when a leak was discovered, and of such a nature as to cause some alarm. An engineer was summoned, and on investigation, it was seen that something must be done at once. Above the dam on the east shore of the pond is now being built a cofferdam to hold back the water while the work on the new dam is in progress. This is a large sheet of water held back by the dam, and the interested ones, those who have factories on the stream, consider it good policy to take this extra precaution, especially as at times the pond gets very high and the danger is thereby increased. So that was the comment. Approximately a couple years later, wait, I forgot. And you'll be glad to hear this. Those residing on the banks of the stream have nothing to fear, as every precaution is being taken, and the management can be trusted to do everything as it should be and protect the interests of everyone who is the least bit concerned. By 1910, the dam was rebuilt. It was probably the first time the dam was built at the current location, but it may have been actually the one that was built 35 years earlier. I know you have your thing, but I also have other things that say that, they conflict. So Ben Pratt thought the engineer who built it was probably our grandfather, George's and my grandfather, who moved to Antrim with his young factory family later, and founded Coy and Pratt along with Ben's father, Henry. So about that same time, a developer wanted to develop White Birch Point, so he thought that it would be better. He petitioned for it to be named Gregg Lake instead of Gregg Pond, because vacationers wouldn't come to stay on a pond. So,
Unless it really was a pond.
it began to become more of a recreational lake than a working lake. So, but there were some controversies here and there. So there were drenching spring rains in 1936, which caused a lot. You may have seen like photos of the floods downtown. But it was followed by a severe drought. So there's an article from the Reporter. It says, entitled, this is in 1936, November 1936. Gregg Lake doomed as summer resort is opinion of a former summer visitor. So I'll just read this quickly, too. Several years ago, while touring New Hampshire, I visited a friend who had a cottage at Gregg Lake. I was so impressed with the natural setting of the lake, the tranquility of its surroundings, and by several refreshing dips in its cool waters that I became quite enthusiastic in relating its charms to my friends upon my return home. And it goes on, but then I had promised my friends a summer paradise, and they in turn expected it. I did not believe that ever in my life was I so shocked as when I arrived at the lake on August 1st of last summer with my friends. Remember, this was a severe drought. In place of a beautiful lake was a miniature dismal swamp. Jagged rocks and tree stumps, impossible eelgrass, flotsam and jetsam of all description confronted us. The beautiful little lake I had so enthusiastically described had disappeared. In its place was something that was an abomination to the eye and nose. My friends were considerate as I stepped back into my car, disillusioned and bewildered, for they did not chide me. With a sickness of mind and heart, I started back towards Antrim, my friends following to seek a cottage elsewhere in New Hampshire. On the way back, as I struggled to hide my grief, I became aware of running water. And there, in a roaring torrent, was a stream cataracting downhill from the lake. Anybody guess what that would have been? There was the answer. The lake, one of the most charming I had ever seen, had been turned into a quagmire to run a mill. Well, industry is essential, but wasteful industry discredits a neighborhood and ruins its beauty. I do not believe I shall ever return to Antrim. Anyway, she went on. It's too bad that something could not be done, etc. But a week later in the Reporter is a response. Water from Gregg Lake gives work to majority of the people of Antrim. Dear sir, that was Mrs. Emma Felon. Dear sir, presumably Mrs. Felon does not know that without the mills there would be no Gregg Lake, that they built the dam that holds back the water and maintain it. It evidently doesn't occur to her that a large part of Antrim depends on those mills for its living. Since few human operations are perfect, it may be that the water might be used somewhat more economically at times, but it is certainly inaccurate to call a use of the water which provides the necessities of life for so many people mercenary. No one would be more grateful than the mill owners if Mrs. Felon and her friends could show them how to maintain a sufficient water supply, a sufficient supply of rain to run the mills, and still keep the lake at its utmost beauty, which, quote, the natives also appreciate. Very truly yours. Any guess? Rachel E. Coy. Would have been grandmother to some of us here. So I just want to keep moving on. But so these are the two articles, which are kind of fun to read. So there have been...
By the way, they used to turn the water off at night.
Yeah, that's right. They did, so they would hold it up so they could open them back up to run the mills. Oh, Vanna, you're not doing your job.
I'm stiffening up.
Yeah, I know. Me too. I can't move my fingers anymore either. Okay. So you won't be able to see these, but if anybody wants to look. Vanna was really... Okay. I'll just hold this rather than try to put it back. So these are some photos that Ben Pratt gave me of rebuilding the dam in 1970. if anybody wants to look. I mean, we couldn't blow them up because they're just small photos. But you can see, like, one of these is what's starting to appear. You can see piles of rocks going along right in the mouth of the channel there. And you can see also what the water running down the channel through towards the dam, and them working on patching what looked like, at least in the initial photos, there's some pretty big cracks in the dam. So that was just a repair, because I think it was rebuilt when it's dated now 1982. It was rebuilt then, but it's been repaired and things many times. So what I would like to do then is to say, look at this, it's snowing. What can we try? So that's what we can see. When we lower the lake, which I really want to see what I can see when the lake goes down. When we lower the lake, we can start to see some of the old things, like the old dam. You can start to see some of the stone walls going in. But what can we see under the water? So we're gonna speed this up, maybe. I don't know, my hands are turning purple. So you can do bathymetry. This is bathymetry my cousin Susie and I did for New Hampshire DES one summer. We just crisscrossed the lake back and forth, collecting every point we could. Yeah, people thought we were nuts because we were just going back and forth. But you can see, maybe I should turn this upside down so yeah, I was going to say, I'll turn this upside down. So we are right here in this, what is really fake. Talk about the fake part of the lake. We are here. So this is the shallow end of the lake, and this part of the lake is called the meadows. Can you guess why? It used to be meadows, yeah. They used to actually, one of the major criteria for controlling the water at Gregg's Dam was that the water could be let down so the meadows could be mowed. So the meadows were mowed. This is all shallow. The deep spot is right here. It's about a little more than 37 feet deep. So you can see where all sorts of things are. And you can see that it gets quite shallow leading up to where the old dam was, and then the new dam is down here, farther down the channel. So the old dam was right here. So if you look across the lake from here, you can see the White Birch Point Beach, and on the left, across the channel, is Ken Aiken's beach in there. So the old dam went right across there, and you can see it. I mean, you can bump into it if you get too close to it in a boat. So there's a channel that goes through it to the new dam that was built down here. So what else can we see? What other methods do we have? Well, when we were trying to figure out what might be in the lake, when we were trying to figure out some things about what might be putting nutrients into the lake. Thank you. I went over to a pop-up science program by the Harris Center over on Norway Pond in Hancock one day, and there was a guy doing ground penetrating radar, and he was just like, "Oh, another lake? Could I do it on your lake?" I was like, "You got to be kidding! We don't have to pay any money." So I ran into this guy named Steve Arconi, who was just dying to come over and do ground penetrating radar on Gregg Lake. So Steve, he had to actually get some different equipment. He made multiple trips back to Lebanon and back down to get the right equipment. But this is just a photo of the first day, I think, that we did ground penetrating radar, walking across the ice. So this was even harder than maybe going back and forth in a canoe. This is Peter Boblowski. Peter did some, Celeste Lunetta did some. Ben Pratt was the best at just walking and keeping a straight line and a good pace. I kept getting distracted and wandering sideways or something, and my tracks are like this. But so we went crisscrossing the lake doing ground penetrating radar on freezing cold, windy days. This is Peter pulling, Steve Arconi manning the controls, and me writing down the data. So GPS points, where we started every track, and things like that. So we did it. We spent quite a few days doing it. Steve really was having a great time. But I don't expect you to actually see all this stuff or understand, because I can't tell you every feature either. But we found some really interesting features in Gregg Lake that are unique to Gregg Lake. So, this geologist getting really excited. And he came back in the summer one time. I got to row him and his girlfriend all around the perimeter of the lake. Oh, let's go over there. Let's go over there. It's like, well, why don't you row for a while? But what he just found what he thought was some really interesting and unique features of Gregg Lake, which he's also found. There's one other lake around fairly nearby that he's found some of it in. So what you can see if you do a trace across, this goes from your property, the Koi Forest, diagonally across the lake and down. It ends up right near the mouth of the channel. But you walk across, and so this is sending radar, sonar? I forgot what the LiDAR. Yeah, it's not radar. Well, that's what it's ground penetrating radar. Yeah, so it's sending radar waves down, and we're dragging the antenna, which is catching the reflections. So we can see, as we're looking down here, I'm not good at picking out where the bedrock is, but on this pass, we could see a slope, we could see a mini basin with a rock pile. So there are boulders underground, so we could see like 50 or 60 feet under the bottom of the lake. So that's why this is neat. So, because there are some other lakes that have either stashes of trees that came down in the 1938 hurricane and were stashed in the lake to preserve them, and are now starting to decay and feeding a lot of plant nutrients and stuff, so they cause algae and cyanobacteria growth and stuff like that into the lake. Ben Pratt assured me that there was only one person that might have stashed trees in Gregg Lake, and that would have been our grandfather. But he also assured me that if old GH, as he called him, did that, he would have removed every single stick he put in the lake. So thankfully, we found no evidence of logs from 1938 still beginning to decay in the bottom of the lake. We also didn't find something else that Steve Arconi had found, which is over at Joe English Pond. Was that in New Boston? It was used for target practice during, I don't know, was it World War II, World War I? I don't remember. But there's live bombs in the bottom of Joe English Pond. So what Steve, he showed me one of his scans of Joe English Pond. You can see all these round shapes of all these bombs that they dropped in Joe English Pond. So we were hoping that we weren't going to see anything like that in Gregg Lake. And we, yeah, so this is kind of what we saw. We could see steep slopes with rock piles. There's no sediment built up here, but in here there's boulders covered by sediment, so you can actually distinguish what is sediment that came down, this glacial debris from the ice ages, and muck, which is, so we have layers of muck on top of the this is probably the line from when the glaciers receded 11.4 thousand years ago. And you can see this is all muck in here. And there's some very interesting features that are pretty much unique to Gregg Lake, which are these turbidites, which occur when there's shaking and sand and gravel kind of liquefies and runs down, flows like water. So he's found some really interesting turbidites, especially at the south end of the lake. And, oh, Vanna's so slow.
I know. You get what you pay for.
So what we found, we found these interesting turbidites at the far end, and then he got really excited because we did a transect from basically over near the Gregg Lake Road bridge, all the way across to the mouth of the channel. And what you can see is, as you might expect, I guess, is very shallow along here. But you can see that, and you can see down like 60 feet or something to bedrock and to all these layers of sediment that have been put down, what he thinks is basically for 11,400 years, as it all washes out from the ridge over there and comes in, because it's all flowing in from the west there into the lake. You can see what he calls four sets, top sets, four sets, and bottom sets. So you can see how every year there's been a layer, layers on top, and then it's an angle, so it layers there, and then at the bottom it builds up too. So we've got like 11,000 years worth of sediment building up in here since the glaciers pulled out, and it's like 50 feet deep. But it's really neat because he said you rarely see just such a nice, even deposition of sediment like that. But he also had a question for me. He said, there's a discontinuity right in here. There's a discontinuity. So the four sets stop. Everything stops. And he said, did anything ever happen in there? It's like, yeah, the Boy Scouts used to dredge a channel from near the boat launch, where the boat launch is currently, out across, so they could take a boat over to the... Before the town beach. Yeah, before the town beach. And you can see the channel that the Boy Scouts had dredged to go to take boatloads over to what was Sachem.
Where was the channel to?
Oh, so the what is now the harbor camp was a Boy Scout camp many years ago.
There was no road in.
Yeah, so before there was a road in, I guess there was Brimstone Corner Road, but there wasn't a road into the camp. So they would just load up a boat, and all of this wasn't here, because this is all totally fake built. But although it's rather a nice addition to the town, yeah. let's not knock this too hard. How hard some of us worked on this. But yeah, so they just had a channel so they could get a fairly large boat. I mean, yeah, not huge, but through to supply. Yeah. So they would just, because it's really only 3 or 4 feet deep most of the way out here. So yeah, it was. It was pasture. It was mowed. Even in my lifetime, it was mowed, and that's a long time. So there were these really neat things. But the other thing we crossed over is when we did this transect. Somewhere out there in the middle, we found this pile of rocks, and it was like, this is weird. So to make a very, very long story short, we came back and did a whole bunch of transects across trying to find out about these piles of rocks. Oh, Vanna! Someday he'll kill me. So what we did all these crisscrossing transects. And as I said, I'm not very good at walking in a straight line and forgetting that I'm supposed to be keeping a solid pace. But we found these piles of rocks, and there are 2 that are they reach all the way down to where it's 25 feet deep, and the tops of these are about 12 feet deep. Susie, my cousin, where's David? I'm his mother. And I have gone out with a long pole, taking GoPro videos of these rock islands for Steve Arconi. and done all sorts of depth soundings and things. You know, Susie's really good at towing me while I reach down with a 25-foot pole. Anyway, so we've got videos. These are rock piles. They're not, it's not like solid bedrock coming up. They're rock piles, and they show this interesting pattern of deposition around the sides. So here's where the muck is built up around them. But below that, you can see that they have this even deposition down the sides, and it's even in all directions. So Steve Arconi is just really excited about this because it shows that they weren't just thrown in, they weren't hit by some flood like where Susie's house is. That's clearly pushed in by floodwaters. But these are rock mounds probably from the glaciers that were deposited, and then there was an earthquake that shook them, or multiple earthquakes. But they have been shaken before a lot of the deposition went on. All the small stuff has been shaken out because that's what happens if you have an earthquake. It shakes. Anything that's small enough gets liquefied and spreads out. If it's an earthquake, it spreads out evenly on all sides from the mound. So we have these unique earthquake-shaped mounds out there. And he's found one other lake fairly nearby, and I don't know which one it is, I'm afraid, that has similar signs of an earthquake. So he got, as I may have told you when I was rowing him around the lake, he got really excited to see the rocks coming down on the Spedden property, because that's also evidence of an earthquake. I mean, I always just looked at, oh, great climbing rocks. But he was all excited, row me there, to say that is also evidence that the rocks were shaken and tumbled down because they're sitting on top of sediment that was deposited by the glacier. So, you know, this is what we see by doing some of this stuff in Gregg Lake. We've analyzed, done long runs across these rock piles. They're really neat rock piles. There's one actually that's buried. So we find it by doing the ground penetrating radar, we found it buried underneath. But in reading back, like some of the adventures of people who weren't too happy about their visits to Gregg Lake in the 1930s or something, what I found out was people knew about these and they would go out and swim out to them, because then, especially if the lake wasn't too high, they could actually stand on them, stuff. So that's, I don't know, it's probably, is everybody cold enough? That's kind of what I was hoping to present, is a whole different view of Gregg Lake than what you see by sitting here looking at our beautiful lake. So I've probably forgotten a bunch of stuff, but that's it. Any questions? Oh, so during the hurricane, it appears that our grandfather maybe didn't do it, but during the hurricane of '38, so many trees came down that they couldn't process them into lumber. So they would start to rot very quickly or get worm-eaten. So our camp at the far end has wood that was processed from worm-eaten trees. So you can sit, and that's from the hurricane of '38. So they built it because there was wasted wood. But if they put the logs in the water, they would be preserved. So they would preserve, and there are lakes around, where the stuff that was thrown in the lake after the 1938 hurricane is now decayed.
I actually thought about
we don't have any sign of that here, but yeah, and that's why I said, like the dam.
I get to see the player stood up.
It was a very old dam. The wood inside the dam started.
God, it's so. I'll have to look.
Let's see. You can look it up on Zello. It'll tell you the last Morgan.
Oh yeah, what was the? Oh yeah, I'll see that.